Hello everyone, AJ here. Welcome back to Art Isn't Easy, and I don't blame you if you're coming into this video with a little bit of caution because I can't deny that I have been sort of downplaying 1965 as a year for cinema. I am guilty of that. That isn't to say that any of these films are bad, but I do want to discuss these films because even if they're not exactly near perfect or masterpiece level, I do love a lot of the concepts that they look to tackle. My number 10 choice, because I'm doing no honorable mentions for this list, is one of the more unique ones because it's technically a short film. It's only about 45 minutes long, and it is by a very well known director that I've already discussed, and that's Louis Buñuel. And this is Simon of the Desert. So this one is about a man named Simon. He is traveling through the desert. His hope is that he wants to get nearer to God, but instead he is approached by the devil, who is played by a female actress, who wants him to come into her realm. And for the record, he's been traveling through the desert 6 years, 6 weeks, and 6 days, so hence the devil. I did battle on what I wanted to put in my number 10 slot because nothing sounded right, but I thought that there was enough about Simon of the Desert in terms of its aesthetic, the concept, how Buñuel filmed it. It's also the last film that he made in Mexico before he immigrated back to France and made a lot of his more famous films there. At number 9, we have Antonio Petrangeli's I Knew Her Well. When I think of Italian cinema in the 60s, there's obviously Fellini and Antonioni, Visconti, those guys. But there was this element of comedy, or what it was called commedia all'Italiana. Antonio Petrangeli was a devotee of this art form. Now, I Knew Her Well is a bit different from a lot of the films in this genre. It does start off as a bit effervescent. So you have Adriana, who's played by Stephanie Sandrelli, and she had been the love interest of Marcello Mastroianni in a divorce Italian style. In this film, she is moving to Rome. She wants to become a celebrity of some capacity. But the thing is, there's not a lot of motivation to her, so that does sort of hurt the film's power. But she's very captivating as an actress, so that makes it a little bit more easy to watch. But I can't deny that it's a film that has its issues and is mostly buoyed up by the performance of Sandrelli, and that is the main reason why I included it here. But at number 8, we have an early work of Milos Forman, who would go on to win Oscars for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Amadeus. And this is Loves of a Blonde. There are a lot of people who really love Loves of a Blonde. And I mean, obviously, I think highly enough of it to include it on this list, but it's certainly not a masterpiece by any means. And this is where I want to say that so far, the films that I've discussed, including Loves of a Blonde, only get 4 stars out of 5 for me, which is kind of, it's not the best year for film if I can't even get like enough 4.5 stars to fill out a list. The film revolves around Abdullah. She is a working class woman, works in a factory, and she's outnumbered by the men around her because that's kind of par for the course of that time. But despite this, she does try to forge relationships with many of the men around her. And much like I Knew Her Well, Loves of a Blonde does suffer from not having enough of a insight into what makes Abdullah tick. And the actress, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce her last name right, so please forgive me, but her name is Hanna Breshova. So if that is wrong, I'm sorry. She's definitely a captivating actress to watch, much like Sandrelli was in I Knew Her Well. But it is a very difficult character to fully connect with, at least to me. One thing that did come to mind when I was like preparing to talk about this film was I have seen criticisms about Sean Baker not giving enough backstory insight to the character of Annie and Honora. And honestly, even though I was a fan of Honora, I'm not sure it should have won Best Picture, but that's another debate. But I do think that there was a little bit of a backstory missing to Annie that I would have loved to have seen. And perhaps 10 to 15 minutes that were devoted towards that group running around South Brooklyn could have been devoted to developing that character more. But alas, I do like seeing a film like this with a female protagonist. I just wish we could have gotten more out of her and the script in general. But it's a solid effort for Milos Forman. Now, at number 7, we have a film that I find rather fascinating. And also, a little tidbit, this is the only film that I've seen by this director, and it happens to be his feature debut. That director is Marco Bellocchino, and the film is Fists in the Pocket. We follow a rather despicable character here. So we have Alessandro. He's an epileptic. He lives with his blind, widowed mother and his brother Leone, who's also an epileptic. The eldest brother, Augusto, is the only one left in the family that appears to have any semblance of sanity. They have a sister named Julia. She's a bit mentally disturbed. And Alessandro finds himself sexually attracted to her, despite the fact that he's rather appalled by her behavior. Augusto has a fiancée named Lucia, and Lucia receives an anonymous letter from a woman claiming that Augusto got her pregnant. Alessandro finds out that Julia wrote this note, just like a very sick prank that backfires. And because he wants his older brother to live a life of peace that his family can't provide, he decides he's going to kill the rest of the family. And needless to say, the religious sector of Italy, the Catholics, as Catholics often ruin pretty much anything, most organized religion ruins everything. A film, once again, not perfect, then again, no film is, but I do really love the style and the confidence that Bellocchino had for this debut. And to be fair, I should check out more of his work. I haven't really come across any of his work aside from this one. I also think of a director like Peter Greenaway, who did The Cook, The Thief, His Wife, and His Lover, because that is his most well-known and acclaimed film, but it was the only film of his I've seen. So I do feel like maybe I should check out more of Bellocchino's work, because as a debut, this is a very bold and risque topic for its time. And I do love that it shook up the religious sector in Italy, because that's always fun to do. Now, at number 6, we have the most famous film that I've discussed so far, and that is David Lean's Dr. Zhivago. If you were to look at the top grossing films of all time adjusted for inflation, Dr. Zhivago would actually be on that list, along with another film that's coming up. And it is interesting what films do have a stronghold over time, because you don't really hear anyone talking about Dr. Zhivago anymore. And to be fair, I'm not saying it's certainly not Lean's best film. I mean, Lawrence of Arabia and Bridge over River Kwai are superior. I've already proclaimed my love of Brief Encounter, which is a far cry from any of these films. But Dr. Zhivago was based on a famous book that had been banned in the Soviet Union and therefore became a huge success over here. I don't really feel like going into it too much. Obviously, there's a famous love story intertwined with the revolution. Critics at the time did bemoan that the love story took more hold over the revolution aspect. And I will say, the film Reds, directed by Warren Beatty from the early 80s, that one I felt did a better job at balancing the revolution and a romance in a very compelling way. I actually am a big fan of Reds. So whenever I get to the 80s, spoiler alert for 1981, that'll be factored high on that list. But Dr. Zhivago does have its appeal. It's a lean film, so it's visually stunning. And also, Lara's theme is one of my favorite pieces of film music that I've come across. Some of you might know it as the lyrical version, which is Somewhere My Love, but I do prefer it more as an instrumental piece. So Dr. Zhivago, yes, it has enough merits to be included here. Now, at number 5, we have a documentary. And the thing about documentaries is I always seem to include them in a class by themselves. So if there is an amazing documentary, I'm more prone to not include it on the list because I tend to think of the fictional narrative films more. But that's not to say that documentaries are lesser in my eyes. I just feel like they're their own beast. But sometimes in years like this, I end up including them when they have a profound effect of sorts. So with this documentary, we have Kon Ichikawa's Tokyo Olympiad, which is going into the 1964 Olympics that were set in Tokyo. I discovered this documentary in 2004, which would have been during the Athens Games. And Tokyo Olympiad had not been seen in a while. It may come as no surprise to you, but I am not exactly a fan of sports. But I do enjoy watching the Olympics despite their problems. And what I appreciate about Tokyo Olympiad is that while it doesn't necessarily go deeply into the sports themselves, like we do see those moments, like you go a lot into like their lives, like these athletes are human beings. And there is pomp and circumstance, but it's not the main focus. You could argue that it's a companion film to Riefenstahl's Olympia, which was about the 36 Berlin Olympics, where you had Hitler and like Jesse Owens and all that fun stuff, because it's always fun to ruin the life of a Nazi. And I am glad that Criterion picked it up because it was, I don't want to say in obscurity, but it was very hard to get a hold of for a long time. Now, at number 4, we have easily the most famous film on this list. And I want to propose a theory here. Is the song Climb Every Mountain a sexual allegory? That's right, we're talking about number 4, Robert Wise's The Sound of Music. Those hills are alive, and is that hill a tent pole in Christopher Plummer's pants? Perhaps. So, climb every mountain, the tent pole, ford every stream, Maria's getting excited, follow every rainbow, they have sex, till you find your dream, they both climax. Think about it. Now, granted, a nun singing that song, I mean, some of you that might be Catholic might be like, oh no, God, that's sacrilegious. Please stop. But I don't know. Frankly, I think it's just getting a little hot in here. It's like, ooh, just like, oh God, it's getting hot in here. Let's start playing some Nelly. I've had people defend the film to me. Obviously, I do really like the film. I like the musical. Like, it's a little bit of a guilty pleasure of mine. One thing that Julie Andrews always said in interviews is that Christopher Plummer's presence in the film helped make it less saccharine. But what I think hurt the film a lot was how much they cut out the Baroness and Max's scenes, especially their songs. Because there's the duet they have in the stage show, How Can Love Survive? And then eventually they sing a song with the captain called No Way to Stop It, which is basically about Nazism coming in, and that they just have to like accept it. Like there's no way to stop it. Nazism is on the way. Fascism. Hooray! So I do wish that the film had kept those songs in. I do think it was very wise that they cut An Ordinary Couple and replaced it with something good. Because even Richard Rodgers, because Oscar Hammerstein had passed by this point, even Richard Rodgers was like, oh yeah, we really wanted to cut that song from the beginning, but Hammerstein was too sick to write a new song, so they kept it kind of out of necessity. But I do love that Something Good is here. It is a more, I'm not really a fan of it lyrically necessarily, because Rodgers wasn't exactly the strongest lyricist, but melodically it is a very charming song, and I do think it works well within the confines of the film, and I do love that most productions since replaced An Ordinary Couple with that song. But yes, regardless, Sound of Music is a film that I revisit quite a bit. It is the film that I've seen the most from this list by far, even over my top 3 choices. At number 3, we do have a film by Jean-Luc Godard, and this is often considered one of his best. I would also agree with that, but as I've established, I'm not the biggest fan of Godard as some are, and compared to his contemporaries. But here we have Perrier Le Fou. When this film had its premiere at the Venice Film Festival, it got booed. And time can often do things to films, but I mean, you can't always go off of film festival crowds, because if we were to do that, a couple years ago when Emilia Perez had its premiere at Cannes, it received rave reviews, the 4 actresses won Best Actress in Tandem, and then we all saw it and were like, what the bloody is this? I haven't talked about Amelia Perez yet on this channel, but what a god awful film. What an insulting film. Jacques Audiard deserves to be slapped in the face multiple times. I mean, then there's also what okay, I'm calm now. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not sorry about when it's about Amelia Perez because that film fucking sucks. It sucks. Okay, I'm done now. I'm sorry about my rant, not about the film insulting because that film deserves it. Okay, okay, I'm coming down. Okay, yeah. Anywho, so this film goes into the character of Ferdinand. He had been working at a television station. He gets fired. He feels aimless. Also, he is married, but he decides that he's going to leave his wife and their children for an ex girlfriend that he wants to return to, and that's Marianne. So, yes, moral gray areas, complications there. But the film takes a turn when Ferdinand arrives at Marianne's apartment and there is a corpse. And it turns out that Marianne is being chased by the AOS, which was a far right group that had been formed during the Algerian War. It's a bonkers film. The directions this film takes, I can't help but commend Godard for what he achieved here, even if it's still not anywhere near a lot of the films from that era that I've preferred from the French New Wave. It's probably his second best film after Vive sa vie, which also has Anna Karenina because she plays Marianne in this. It is a very unique film for the time period, but it's not a film for everyone, and I don't feel like Godard is for everyone else. We're now going to talk about a film by Akira Kurosawa, and that is a film that is highly praised, but is not a film that I feel like gets discussed as much as like the Seven Samurais of his filmography, and this is Redbeard. The significance of Redbeard is it's the final film that he made with Toshiro Mifune, who got very bitter during the process because it took roughly 2 years to film it due to Kurosawa falling ill. That cost Mifune other film and television opportunities, so he's like, I can't do this anymore. But they made 16 films together, quite possibly the most fruitful filmmaker actor collaboration in cinema history. The Redbeard is about a very young hotshot doctor who feels he deserves the world, but he's sent to a remote part of Japan to work with an old aging doctor that's played by Mifune, and they call him Redbeard in the village. And basically, this young doctor is humbled by how Mifune, or Redbeard, tends to the people of the village. When the film was released, it actually did very well in Japan, but was not as well received worldwide. It did have a reputation that built over time. It is fascinating how that can sometimes flip flop with certain films. I do feel the film is very sentimental in a way that a lot of Kurosawa films are not. I mean, aside from stuff like Akiru, for example. But I do think that Redbeard is a film that deserves more attention. I do think it's one of Kurosawa's most underrated works. I mean, granted, but the man made so many masterpieces that it kind of just falls down the list by default. And also, I mean, I've already said a lot of negative things about 1965, but I mean, the man made so many five-star masterpieces, and this film still only gets 4.5 stars from me, which is another telling point that I've not discussed a single five-star film yet of these 10. But my number one film happens to be the only five-star film on this list. But I found the following film, my number one film, to be very touching in a way that could have been very maudlin. Maybe some of you would find it maudlin. But it does go into the topic of fascism, Nazism, again, and that is Jan Kadar and Ilmar Kios's The Shop on Main Street. It does play into a certain trope where you have a villainous character who's a little bit wishy-washy, but of course he finds out that maybe he doesn't agree with all these evil Nazis that deserve to be killed and punched in the face and tortured for a while because they're Nazis, and that's fine. I stumbled upon this film sort of by accident. I was studying through films that had been nominated for like Best Picture or Acting Awards. And Ida Kaminska, the elderly actress who was in the film, got a Best Actress nomination. Okay, I watched the film and I realized that it was masterful. And it was an early example of a foreign film I watched where I was like, oh, this is better than basically all the nominees from that year. So, a little bit about the film. We meet a very meek Slavic carpenter named Tono, and he's asked to be something of an authority figure to this elderly woman who runs a button shop. And her name is Rosalia, and that's the Kaminska character. And basically, he is coming in to sort of run the shop for her. But here's the thing, she's basically mostly deaf. She's practically deaf. So she doesn't even really know what's going on around her. But the thing that's going on around her is the Holocaust. And she is Jewish, and the Nazi occupied areas are wanting to keep an eye on her for that reason. But as you might expect, Tono and Rosalia develop a very close friendship. And it's heartwarming and sort of like bickery. And it's like, and this is where I do appreciate the film too, because it could be a complete slog fest, but the thing about tragedies in particular is that it's always good to keep in certain moments of levity so you're not completely in the gutter. And there is a way to do that, and this film's a perfect example of how to make it work. And then at the end, it's just a complete punch to the face. Because you might think you know how it ends, but there's a little bit of a twist that just makes it all the more brutal. And I know I sound very gleefully savage with that, but it is a very powerful film. The Shop on Main Street is one of the more underrated films, not just in general, but like particularly about Holocaust films. Because you hear a lot about like Schindler's List or The Pianist, Sophie's Choice, Diary of Anne Frank, and like all these films. But like The Shop on Main Street up there with like, I mean, Come and See gets a lot of attention too. But I also talked about Diamonds in the Night for 64. These are Holocaust films that I think hold a lot of weight and deserve more attention. And I do think The Shop on Main Street is a great example of a film that balances that tragedy with a little bit of levity and then makes it for all the more tragic at the end. And with that, we come to an end with 1965. I think I spent the majority of this video going on rants about Amelia Perez. Keep time out there before something else happens again. I know I keep bringing up Amelia Perez. I'm sorry. I don't even know why. It's like I haven't even thought about that film that much lately, and yet here we are again. I'm just thinking about the film and how angry, and it's like man to woman, woman to man, from penis to vagina, and it's like yes, I might still need help from Amelia Perez. I didn't realize I was still that deeply affected by it. So 1966 will be up next, obviously, and it is a bit of an improvement over 1965. There are some true classics here, and I do want to thank you all for watching. Hopefully none of you really love Amelia Perez because you probably just got very turned off by this video. I do have some new topics I would like to discuss. And if you saw my post on the channel, you can like read about what I'm like looking to do. So I hope you all will be on the lookout and join me for those topics. So thank you all for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you all soon. Bye bye.